Hi everybody, it's Couple Indemnity. We are a film podcast about the love of cinema by two very dedicated film fans. I'm Hal, and as ever this week, I'm joined by Izzy.
Hi everyone.
Your selection this week is, following Brief Encounter, you went for another big hitter, one that's very highly acclaimed from the early 80s, and another Meryl Streep movie, and our first war film in quite a while.
Yep. I mean, it comes with a big reputation, this film. Its reputation kind of precedes it a little bit. And we were trying to think about what other kind of films we've seen that kind of run on the same themes of this, or the same time period.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and we backtracked a little bit before we hit the record button, and we saw that the only war film we've officially probably done would be Saving Private Ryan, and we could maybe say Sound of Music for the time period as well that it was covering. But the one film I think we particularly thought of was a film that we had watched together before Couple Indemnity. That was Zone of Interest.
Oh yeah,
that was the one that we had the most flashbacks to.
Yeah, especially the I mean, we'll get into it, but especially the scene where they move from the camp through the gate into the family home just beyond, and the kind of the contrast with the children playing on the other side of the wall. Like, that was very reminiscent of, or you can see where Zone of Interest has maybe got that inspiration from. Yeah. That kind of sweeping shot over the wall, bird's eye view, over the barbed wire, and then just children giggling and playing in the garden with their dogs.
Yeah, one of the most uncomfortable sort of environments that you can witness, I think, in cinema. Like the paradise inside the family home of a Nazi general who lives in the midst of a concentration camp.
Yeah, and that scene in Zone of Interest that lingers with me is the river scene, when they're all playing in the water and they realise what's being washed down the river. Yeah.
One day we'll have to cover that on the podcast, because it was a very highly rated film, certainly from ourselves, and it did win a lot of awards. Definitely one of the best modern British war films in the last couple of years. We'll do that and save it for a time when we've cheered ourselves up a bit after this movie.
But there was also elements of like Band of Brothers, like the last episode of Band of Brothers when they go into the camp they find in the woods. There was elements of that as well that I thought of when we were watching it.
Yes, because this film runs in kind of different parts. So it's the first half of it is very much a post-war story about three characters. But the second half of it moves into flashbacks, and obviously that particular moment you're talking about is one of the major flashpoints. But what did we think overall, having watched it for a first time watch for both of us?
I think for both of us it was not what we expected.
That's, I think, what we both first said, wasn't it? That it wasn't what we expected. Really took a kind of different direction to what we had anticipated for a film about a character who had experienced the Holocaust.
But like, even when you read the synopsis and you hear people talk about this film, they always lead with obviously the choice that she makes. But that's really not what the whole film is about. And
no.
That's what was so shocking.
And it's hard to kind of gauge if we're disappointed by this or if we were impressed with it for other reasons. Because for me, this turned out to be a much more developed and complex character story that I'd anticipated. On an emotional level, for me, this didn't quite hit the heights I was anticipating or thought it would do.
Yeah. Like, I'm the first to cry at films. And I was like, I need the tissues, I need them within reaching distance, because I know people have told me this is a really, like, emotional film. And I think we'll talk about it, but I think I understand why it wasn't for me, necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's distressing and disturbing, but I didn't have the emotional reaction I thought I was going to have to it.
No. And it did have very kind of mixed reviews from the critics on its release, and yet it did win certain awards. And it was hugely respected for the performance aspect of it, as it rightly should be. And we'll talk about that in the story. Let's break for the trailer for the moment.
There are secrets beyond imagination. There are memories time cannot erase. It was a season of delight in a place called Brooklyn. The season of Sophie and Nathan, and a young man called Stingo.
I love that piece.
Look at this, God's gift. Give me a kiss. One kiss.
Salami, you know that song, right?
All summer long they were together, drawing ever closer to the mystery of Sophie. Ever closer to her unthinkable secret. Sophie.
Oh, please don't go! Don't go away from me, please!
When I told you that the only thing I absolutely demand of you, the only single thing, is fidelity?
Sophie, why'd you lie to me?
Oh, the truth. The truth. I don't even know what is the truth. After all these lies I have told.
Tell me why.
There are so many things you don't understand. So many things that I can't tell you.
Explanation, please! Explain! Explain!
Sophie's Choice, released in December 1982, based on the book released 3 years earlier by William Styron, starring the great Meryl Streep, Kevin Kline, Peter MacNicol, and directed by Alan J. Pakula. Your selection is, can you give us the synopsis?
Sophie is a survivor of Nazi concentration camps who has found a reason to live with Nathan, a sparking if unsteady American Jew obsessed with the Holocaust.
So a movie of two halves.
Yeah. And the first half for me felt almost... I feel like I've said this in a podcast recently, but it felt almost Gatsby-esque to me, the first half of this film. This kind of young author, Stingo, who's moved to Brooklyn, very similar to how Nick does in Gatsby, but obviously a bit 20 years later, in 1947, so it's post-war, just. And he moves into this quite gothic-looking mansion that's been divided into flats. And the night he moves in, he gets this book left on his doorstep, or left in his room, with a note in it. And it says, come for dinner sometime, from your neighbours, Sophie and Nathan. But that isn't actually Stingo's first meeting in person with these two characters. It's overhearing, first of all, them having sex upstairs, and like the light kind of shaking, and then about an hour later, just a screaming row break out, and then Nathan kind of threatening her on the staircase and
so I think early on
her.
this guy Stingo, played by Peter MacNicol, he's very much observing that this couple very much live a love-hate passionate relationship on the surface, and his first one-on-one encounter with Kevin Kline's character Nathan is very much on the receiving end of an abusive backlash, and he's getting a first-hand account of how tumultuous and quite poisonous and toxic this guy can be.
Yeah. I mean, just to go back to that first shot we get of Stingo, I think the whole kind of dynamic is foreshadowed in the very first shot. He's on like a train or like a Greyhound bus or something. I don't know if you remember this. And he's in like the foreground, but all of your attention is on these two strangers next to him on the bus who are like embracing. And like there's this like soldier or I don't know, sailor or something, who's like kissing the neck of this woman who's entangled up in him. And we never see those people again, but I really think like that first shot of Stingo really kind of like foreshadows everything to do with this very odd dynamic that begins between these three characters.
Yeah, I mean, this story is very interesting. I do have like problems with it as a film in terms of its storyline and the way and the direction it took, but I would be interested to almost read the novel, because I think from a character level it's fascinating, the psychology between this trio, that develops in the first half of this film. And Stingo is an interesting guy to look at because the focus around him is very much focused on not only his confidence but his desire to meet women. You know, he says in the narration that he's a virgin.
Was he like 21, 22 years old? He's just left this quite like rural southern town, very Christian, small town, and he's come to Brooklyn to try and become a writer and find himself and also, you know, experience some life and meet a woman. And it's clear that he's very taken by Sophie because she's a very impressive woman with a strong personality, and she's beautiful and stunning. Very glamorous.
So it's interesting, maybe without any dialogue alluding to this, but maybe Nathan can kind of sense that admiration from Stingo to Sophie, and that is what sparks that kind of jealousy under the surface. Yeah, perhaps. But I mean, Stingo repeatedly kind of says that he loves them both, that he holds a lot of affection for Nathan. I think he's overwhelmed by Nathan. I think Nathan is kind of what Stingo wishes he could be in many moments. He's very impressive. He's almost like a bard, the way that he speaks, and then he can kind of put on these kind of performances. And I think Stingo kind of looks up to Nathan as what he wishes he could be, like a bit more confident, a bit more. He's very intense, impressive. And he's extremely performative as well. And he's at his heart, he is a bit of a theatrical. I mean, the trio and the dynamic, the direction that the first half of the film takes is very much based on Nathan's mood swings. Yeah. You know, whether he's up or down. But it's not just like a swing, it's like he has these different... It's almost like he has a split personality disorder because he has these different characters that start to emerge. He has the extremely performative kind of thespian side to his personality, which is when he's like dressing up as a like almost Rhett Butler from Gone with the Wind, or as a 1920s like going out doing a Charleston kind of thing. Yeah. And you can tell that Sophie loves that as well. I think he is. I think when he's in those moods, he is an escape for her. I think she enjoys the kind of fantastical edge of it all, and the lack of self-consciousness that he allows her to experience. And so you have that side of Nathan. You have the completely kind of like the romantic Nathan, which is besotted with Sophie and kind of sweeps them all up in this romantic fairy tale. And then you have the, clearly intoxicated version of Nathan, where he has, it's later revealed that it's drugs. Yeah. But I would have assumed alcohol, where he comes back late at night. Covered in sweat. Just like sweating through his suit. Yeah. Like, it's grim. But also with this mad look in his eyes. And Kevin Kline just plays it fantastically. He's a real standout for me, Kevin Kline, in this. I'm very much aware of his talent. And we'll talk about his career because he went on to become involved with a lot more like blockbustery type films. But in his early career, you really get that theatrical background and his stage influences coming through here, because that intensity and that unpredictability is really born through this character. And I think Stingo and Sophie are drawn to Nathan's kind of he makes sense of the world. Like, he seems very knowledgeable and impressive as well in terms of his like academia, because he says he's a biologist. Yeah. But he also with like specialties in medicine and like creating drugs and things. But he's also like an academic historian and knows a lot about kind of Jewish history because he's himself is Jewish. Yeah. And I mean, this is something that seems quite apparent from the start, is that he almost obsessed with Sophie's background as well. One of the scenes we see, is it in his bedroom that's covered in all the books, Holocaust coverage, and literature.
He's just got like a whole room full of Holocaust, not just Holocaust literature, but like Jewish history.
Jewish history, but a lot of like newspaper cuttings and things like that have made the mainstream news in the years after 45.
And we're immediately told from the start that Sophie isn't Jewish, she's Catholic, but we've also seen the kind of the faint markings of the number on her forearm.
Yeah.
So we know that she was in a camp, but we don't really know what for.
No.
At the beginning.
So we eventually do get one of the first flashbacks, which is how Nathan and Sophie met, which was not long after she had first immigrated to the US. And she's in a public library.
Well, she's in like a language class, like trying to learn English.
Yep.
And she's kind of blown away by this poem she hears, and she asked someone next to her, she said, who wrote that? And it's an American poet called Emil Dickens. And so she goes to the library to try and find it, but she's clearly incredibly weak and frail, and like all her cheekbones are showing. She's so pale and kind of ghostly looking.
The physical transformations in this film, from especially on her part, were extremely impressive.
Well, it gets more extreme as the film goes on. It's quite shocking when you get the flashback to her in the camp and her hair and how her hair's been like shorn. But yeah, this first flashback to see her go from someone so kind of glamorous and healthy and kind of glowing, to see that transformation, this first one is quite shocking. And this is where she gets into an argument with the librarian about the existence of this poet called Emil Dickens.
Yeah.
And eventually collapses, and that's where Nathan finds her. And he ends up like taking her home back to his flat.
Yeah, and obviously this part of the flashback is all told through Sophie's narration, and whether this is romanticised or not, but Nathan, from her own account and version, is much more like romantic, and
he seems very
like
stable,
genuinely stable and nice than we see him in the current.
I mean, a bit pushy, but I think she needs looking after, and I think she's drawn to him as almost like her saviour, and I think that's what explains everything about their relationship and why she stays and why she's so dependent on him, is because he becomes her kind of anchor and she views him as having kind of saved her life. And so he takes her back and cooks her dinner, and at this point he seems almost like very homely and very kind of gentle and just like a nice person.
And earlier you'd mentioned Gatsby, and because it's focused on a trio, and Nick Carraway's narration, very much similar to Stingo's first-hand narration in this. What did you make of the first half of this film as we get the ups and downs through this trio who seemingly are best friends? But there are some major dramatic low points.
I think it becomes clear that Stingo becomes as reliant on them as they are of each other. Like, it becomes such a toxic triangle.
Yeah.
Because every time it explodes, usually with Nathan and Sophie having some sort of like huge argument and Stingo always taking Sophie's side, essentially, it inevitably they're all drawn back together again.
Yeah, because there's one of the first times that Sophie opens up to Stingo, who's fascinated by Sophie and wants to learn more about her background, but he is very respectful and gives her a space. But one of the first times is when Nathan is supposedly still at work in the evening, and Sophie starts to open up and tell him about her Polish background, and we're getting a lot of detail, the most detail we've had at this point about her background. And she's left the door open because she is wanting Nathan to come back, but we have seen the first and early episodes of Nathan's jealousy, so we're not sure how he's going to react when he does come upstairs and sees this.
He's paranoid that Sophie is having an affair.
Yeah,
we've already seen that,
and his reaction is very much as we kind of anticipated, based on what we've learned about this character so far, is that he expects the worst. He doesn't trust Sophie, and thinks that before they'd come into the room that they'd been engaging in some kind of affair.
Yeah, and then that particular episode leads to Sophie and Nathan breaking up, and start the process of moving out. And Stingo decides that it's also time to go, because his father's inherited a farm that he can go and live on. And so the night before he's due to leave, Sophie actually comes back. But in the meantime, Stingo's been so concerned about her, he's ended up following a lead of who Sophie's friend was back to a college professor, a Polish college professor, who reveals to Stingo that Sophie's father wasn't just a linguistics professor, he was an incredibly vocal anti-Semite in Poland before the war. And her husband was also like one of his followers and like adored him. So Stingo ends up confronting Sophie with this, and she admits that it's the truth, and that that her husband was her father's kind of assistant, and they were taken away by the Nazis. And this is when she really starts to open up a little bit more about how she kind of came to be in Auschwitz, that she had started to realise that she didn't agree with her father. She'd always kind of looked up to him and admired him and thought he was the best father in the world. But she was like the typist for him, and she used to transcribe his speeches. And she was transcribing one day and recognised a word she hadn't really heard before coming up a lot, which was extermination. And she was kind of disgusted. She ends up in a ghetto, and she just cannot understand why her father has turned against these people.
And is it at this point she also admits that she had a lover during the war?
Yeah,
in Poland,
Josef,
who worked for the Polish resistance, and she was living with him and his half-sister,
yeah,
who were working actively for the resistance.
And they tried to get Sophie to get involved. I think to, I don't know, use her secretarial skills or to steal something from her father's office. I can't remember.
And
now.
Also, she speaks German very well. So
yes, she also
that's an incredible, like a huge asset.
Yeah, because her father was a linguistics specialist. She speaks a lot of different languages. So they're trying to convince her to, it's to translate some documents, isn't it? But she declines because she has 2 children, and which she reveals as well at this point in the film that she was also a mother to Jan and Ava. And Sophie, in this retrospective narration, reveals that her mother had become very sick. And the reason why she was arrested is because she had travelled out into the countryside to buy meat on the black market. And she hid it under her skirts to make it look like she was pregnant. And she was discovered by a Nazi kind of, like an official SS officer or someone, on the train. And she was arrested with her children.
And also Josef, her lover, was murdered as well.
Yeah, she says that his throat was slit. And it's a strange choice, actually, from the filmmakers, I think, here. And possibly this is a root of my emotional attachment to it, because they actually reveal that Jan, her boy, was transported when they got to Auschwitz to the children's camp, but Ava was exterminated. And she was sent to the crematorium. And that's revealed then, with these kind of glimpses of them on the train.
So we already know that's ultimately what happened.
Yeah, and we're told that kind of in the middle of the film, which I think
takes away a lot of the shock value later on.
Yes, I think so.
And the emotional impact of it, because we get told that this happened, something terrible like that, and we then we see it in more detail as it unfolds later on in a more detailed flashback.
But she chokes on talking about Jan more than she does talk about Ava, which I find is going to take some thinking about, because I can't really understand it.
For me, this is where the film missed its emotional impact for me, because the flashbacks were too intermittent, but they also weren't detailed enough. They were too quick in like the scenes where we didn't really get any kind of characterization other than 2 or 3 minutes with her lover,
Yeah.
and his sister, who were both then murdered by the Nazis. And we didn't really get much insight into her as a mother either.
No, and I would completely agree that I don't feel like the flashbacks are detailed enough when it comes to her as a mother. So for me, the emotional impact doesn't hit because we don't really know these children. We don't know what she's like as a mother because she just kind of springs it on us. I find it interesting that Stingo has more of a reaction to learning she was married than learning she was a mother.
Yeah, and this is what I would be interested to see in the book, to see how much time it devotes to her earlier life as a mother in that different period of her life, and does it grow that character more so in that sense to have its more devastating emotional impact later on.
If we didn't have the narrative going on in Brooklyn, and like that wasn't what the film was about, and the whole thing was about set in the time it was happening, and the whole film is building up to that tragic decision she has to make, where you've got to know the children and you've seen her as a mother develop and challenge and grow and the devastating consequence of it. I think I would.
Yeah, because the film devotes so much time to these three characters in post-war years as a trio, and about their complex and toxic relationships as a threesome, basically.
Yeah.
Like, so much time is spent on that for me it misfires in what it's trying to do later on. Mm-hmm. If it didn't spend so long doing that, we could maybe, in a 2.5 hour film, have found more time to focus on what I'm saying it missed out on.
Yeah. And she does reveal as well that when she was in the camp, and this is our first kind of shot of her with her hair so short and looking very sick, and she is identified in the camp as someone with secretarial skill, and so she's taken from the camp to Rudolf Hoss, who lives attached. He's the commander of Auschwitz, and she's taken to his house, which backs onto the camp, to become his secretary. And it does appear that she's trying to do something to find out if her son is alive in the children's camp, because she's not seen him.
Well, yeah, she's overheard words of an epidemic in the children's camp, and so I think the first thing she's worried about is if her children have become sick, and if they're still healthy and well.
Yeah.
And crucially, as one of I think it's Hess, it may not have been Hess, who asks him, like, are you worried? Are you just wanting to know if they're alive?
Yeah. Which
is ultimately, like, on a human level, a mother that would be the first thing they would want to know.
What did you think of the scene where she's been approached by another one of the kind of the working in the house as a servant, but is a prisoner of the camp, and he approaches her when she's in the shower, and he says that she has access to the upstairs, so she needs to try and steal a radio and give it to him to smuggle out. And at first she says, no, I'll be killed. But then he's saying, yes, but you could get him to trust you, and then you could find out where your son is. But what did you think of the scene where she spots the radio, she goes into the room, it's in the room of one of the daughters, and the daughter finds her, and then they have this very weird interaction. It's
a complete switch up in the space of 2 or 3 minutes. Like, the daughter goes from being the most robotic, like, Nazi daughter you can ever get, and she's so accusatory and she has eyes like daggers. And within 2 or 3 minutes, they've sat down and they're looking at photos of her as a child.
It was her at the other camp that they used to be in with a heated pool, and she's talking about how much she preferred the other.
What I think Sophie's trying to do is she's trying to fake interest in the family and get on the right side of them, so that she can eventually get her kids out of there for selfish reasons.
That's such a strange...
Because she's saying to various people in the camp, to the Nazi generals, to Rudolf Hess, that she believes in being a pure German and all of these terrible things, and that Jewish people are like an inferior race. She's admitting to that.
Yeah.
I mean, she's basically wheedling her way to say anything that she can impress the Nazis, to get them on her side, so that she can get her own children out of there.
And it's unclear if she's told Nathan this, because we know that she hasn't told Nathan the ultimate
No, yeah.
the darkest secret that she holds about having to make a decision. But it is unclear if she's told Nathan that her father was an anti-Semite, and whether this is why he kind of turns that against her during these arguments.
It's another thing that a day on, I've woken up with so many questions about it, is that Nathan is such an intense character. He's Jewish. He holds a lot of resentment, understandably, to what's happened in the last 10 years. But he's also aware of... I think we know that Nathan is aware of Sophie's background. He probably does know about her father as well. But does he know about all of these details about the children?
No, he doesn't know that she had to make a choice between them.
No, but we're only making assumptions.
No, she says that to Stingo when they're in the hotel room. She says, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody. So we know, I think that is the only thing she makes very clear Nathan doesn't know.
Yeah. And this is about halfway through the film, and we're getting a lot of flashback scenes into the camp and how she's trying to get her children out of there, which is completely understandable on a human level. And any mother would do the same.
And then we break away from the flashbacks for a little bit, and we go back to 1947 and to Stingo. And Stingo gets a call from Nathan's brother asking him to come to his surgery and to talk to him, because Nathan's brother is a doctor. And Stingo goes to him, and he reveals that Nathan is a paranoid schizophrenic, and that all of his claims about being a biologist... I mean, Nathan up until this point has been talking about being on the brink of a scientific discovery and how it's going to change all of their lives, and that's when we get that kind of quite almost like Dead Poets Society scene on the bridge as well, when Stingo's been writing and Nathan kind of gives this very elaborate poetic speech on Brooklyn Bridge about writers.
That scene on the Brooklyn Bridge was almost like it was like straight out of another film, as you say. Like it felt totally incongruous for being in a movie about this subject matter.
Yeah.
Well, I did like it. I think it was great, and Kevin Kline really, really shows his theatrical prowess with that. I mean, he sounds fantastic as he goes on that monologue, on that ramble on the bridge.
So all of that's been going on, and then Stingo is told that actually Nathan is very unstable, and that he isn't a biologist at all. He doesn't have a job at Pfizer. He works in their library. That was a job his brother had obtained for him, and
he basically only assists with a little bit of research. But I essentially gained from that he's there to do much more like administrative work.
And when he gets home, Sophie comes running in all upset and all over the place, saying that Nathan's kind of flipped again, thinking that she's cheating on him, and he has a gun. And Stingo's been on the phone with Nathan and like, do you remember, like, Nathan calls and is like, I'm going to like kill you, or like really threatening over the phone to Stingo, like, I'm coming for you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so Stingo and Sophie are obviously terrified because they hear Nathan like fire the gun on the other end of the phone line. So they flee and they get on the train and they go to a hotel in, I think it's Washington.
Yeah.
And this is where Stingo reveals to Sophie his like plan that is to take her away to the farm in southern states, wherever that is, Texas or somewhere like that, and to get married and have a family and live on this farm away from Nathan. And Sophie is clearly very uncomfortable by this suggestion. Especially, she says, well, we don't need to marry. He says, well, yeah, we would, because we'd be living in small town, very Christian society. Like, we'd need to get married if we're going to live together. She says, well, I'm not going to be able to give you children. Like, your children would be cursed to have a mother like me. And he goes, no, that's not true. And she says, I need to tell you something that I've never told anyone before. And this is where we go back into that final flashback scene where Sophie goes back to when she arrived in Auschwitz with her two children, and how she had been in the queue waiting to be sent to whatever camp, where they kind of assess you. And she gains the attention of one of the guards, and because of the way she looks, and he says, like, he would like to be with her.
He wants to sleep with her.
Yeah. And she then is... Her fatal error here really is trying to plead her case. And perhaps if she hadn't spoken out, I don't know. And that's the kind of guilt that she has to live with for her whole life as well. But she starts arguing and saying that she's Catholic, she doesn't deserve to be here, that her children don't deserve to be there with her, and she starts pleading with this guard to let them go. And because of the attention she's obviously stirring, he tells her that she has a choice and that she needs to choose one of her children to be sent to the children's camp and one to be sent for extermination. And, you know, she argues back. She says she can't make that decision. And he says, well, if you don't choose one, it will be both of them. And that impossible decision that she has to make. And, I mean, it says here that in this kind of the summary of it, it says that she chose to save Jan so that the family name might live on through his offspring. But I don't think that's...
I don't think she consciously...
I don't think that's a conscious decision you make in that moment. And
No.
I think the only reason I could think of is that why she saves Jan and not Ava is because Jan is older and would be more aware of what is happening, perhaps. Or that he's older and he has and he's stronger, so he has more of a chance of surviving the camp and getting out. I don't know, or whether he would be okay on his own and Ava wouldn't. And but it's not ever explained. She never says why she chose the child she did. I mean, the heartbreaking thing in that scene is the actress playing Ava, her little face.
Yeah. I think it's very much around the facial reactions, and it doesn't have its emotional impact on me, this scene, and it is one of the most famous parts of the film that's always talked about, is when she has to make the choice, and the clue's in the name of the film. But that look on Meryl Streep's face as Ava is being carried away to the gas chamber she's almost frozen with her mouth open. She's just in total shock and doesn't know what to do.
It's interesting.
It is a haunting moment.
Yeah, if
Definitely.
you haven't seen it, but I saw it last year and I cried like probably through a good half of the film is Hamnet. And Jessie Buckley's performance as a grieving mother in that film is devastating. Like it actually kind of hits you in some part of the gut that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Even as someone who isn't a mother, that whole film, Hamnet, just destroyed me. But that's because you know the children. You've developed an attachment to these characters over the course of the film. It builds up to it. Whereas with this, you don't know these children.
No.
They're strangers to you. So it just doesn't, for me, have the emotional hit that I thought it was going to have.
And then we go back to Sophie and Stingo, who then sleep together for the first time. And Stingo supposedly loses his virginity with her. And then he wakes up and she's left him a note.
She needs to go back to Nathan. She can't leave him.
Yeah.
That he needs to go and find a nice woman and have a life together, but she isn't going to be that for him, and she would rather die with Nathan than continue living without him. So then we switch. We get one shot of Stingo's kind of face just crumpled and crying as he stands outside the house with a huge crowd and police and ambulances, and the police talking about what's happened. And it's clear that there's kind of been like a suicide pact, I think.
Yeah. I think. See, that choice of ending, I think, was good, because the toxic nature of the first half of the film between the three characters, it justified that kind of tragic choice ending, I think, because it was never going to end all happy clappy, that's for sure.
No, and I think it has to end that way because, I mean, you know, the romantic in me wants Sophie to go and live like a happy, stable life.
Yeah,
but
I just don't think she's...
But it's not realistic, and I think
No.
it also, that cycle needs to end. The toxic cycle that they have entered into and also entangled Stingo in needs to be broken. So Stingo can actually go on and live his life without this shadow hanging over him.
Yeah, exactly.
And he eventually leaves.
Yeah, through the final narration, we get informed that he has moved to a small farm in the south, and he'll continue being a writer, and that's where it ends. So I think the ending was good, and overall I have great respect for this film. I do think it's a film about performances and the acting, absolutely. But I think where it misfires for me is the structure a bit, and I think I just don't like the choices and how we continuously go between the flashbacks, and I think the flashbacks are far too quick.
I just think it's interesting that the film is remembered for being about this woman's choice between her two children, when that's such a tiny bit of the film. Like, such a small section. And I know it's about the guilt that lingers with her, and maybe an explanation as to why she stays with someone so toxic to her, because maybe she's almost punishing herself, that she thinks she deserves it. But I find it a very interesting legacy of the film.
Yeah.
And perhaps if I knew it was about, this toxic relationship first and foremost, whether my expectations would have been different and therefore my reception would be different to it. But it's just not what I expected at all.
We're doing a lot of big movies for the first time, and especially at the moment, and we have done on the podcast. And sometimes when you go into a big new film that's been acclaimed for movie history, it comes with a big reputation. Very much often it turns out to be the case that it isn't really quite what you expected. And this is very much a classic example of that. That's often why when I show you films that I personally love, like great Hitchcock films and great film noirs, and I try not to tell you too much about the context of the plot and the story, because I think the joy of a first time watch, particularly when it really works well for the viewer, is not knowing too much about it. So sometimes the expectations can be a problem. And we'll also talk about Meryl Streep as well soon, because I think we do need to talk about her and how this compares to some of her greatest performances. Because the awards contender on YouTube, who we mentioned in the last podcast, he definitely put Sophie's Choice out with her best performances. It was her second Oscar, wasn't it? So anyway, the production. So the original author, William Styron, had originally wanted Ursula Andress in mind for the part of Sophie. And maybe this is why you can't always trust writers and original authors of these stories, because Ursula Andress, do you know who that is? I think she would have been a terrible choice. She was the original... Well, she was Honey Rider in the first Dr. No film, coming off the beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was a model, really. She wasn't really a top actress.
I mean, maybe looks-wise, that's what William Styron had kind of pictured when writing, and that would make sense, but God, no.
And famously, Meryl Streep was determined to get this role. I think that she'd done 4 major films by this point, only a few years into her career. Supposedly, she pursued the director, Alan J. Pakula, and at one point threw herself to the ground in front of him, begging him to give her the part. Pakula's first choice was a Swedish actress who, in our own awards contenders last year, won the Best Female Actress, I believe, in Liv Ullmann.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's who the director originally wanted. The film was shot mostly in New York, but there were a lot of flashback scenes in Zagreb in Croatia. In terms of awards, at the Golden Globes, the movie was nominated for Best Motion Picture, and Kevin Kline was nominated for Best New Star of the Year. At the BAFTAs, Meryl Streep was nominated for Best Actress, and Kline was nominated for Most Promising Newcomer. At the Oscars, Sophie's Choice was nominated for Best Original Score, Best Costume Design, Best Cinematography, and the only category actually won for was Best Actress for Streep, which, as I said, was her second Oscar after Kramer vs. Kramer 3 years earlier. But bizarrely, Kramer vs. Kramer was Best Supporting Actress.
That doesn't surprise me, because she's not in a lot of that film.
Yeah, I guess so, but she is the main female lead in it. The nominees in the Best category, in the Best Film that year, that Sophie's Choice beat, were E.T., Gandhi, The Verdict, Tootsie, and Missing. So all very different type of movies, but it does feel like a classic film that an Oscar awards ceremony would give.
Yeah, I don't think they would have called it then, but we would definitely be like, it's an Oscar bait film now.
Yeah, Oscar bait is definitely the classic term that's used now. So let's talk about the performances. Meryl Streep as Sophie. This is her third appearance for Couple Indemnity. After the first one was a much more brief appearance in Little Women. And then, of course, that unforgettable lead performance in The Bridges of Madison County last year, which we talk about a lot, don't we?
I feel like we probably talk about that film at least once a week.
No, yeah, and I think it was definitely one of, if not our top film from last year that we watched for the podcast. So where does this rank, and how did we think Meryl Streep was in this role?
I mean, in terms of her her vocal performance, actually kind of similar to Bridges of Madison County, where she's playing Italian, and in this playing Polish. It's so believable. I don't know how she does it.
Her vocal mastery is unbelievable, particularly in this first part of her career. Is this film...
We've got Maggie Thatcher in The Iron Lady as well.
Yeah, but also, as you said, she plays an Italian in Bridges of Madison County, which was in the 90s. In Out of Africa, she does the most incredible, subtle South African accent I've ever heard. Yeah, I mean, we say that DiCaprio did it well in Blood Diamond, but wait till you hear Meryl Streep in Out of Africa. And it's a very hard accent to do, as we know. But a great performance. So where does it rank, would we say?
I don't know if I can rank them because they're so different. Her performance alone in this is exceptional. There is something very special about her performance in Bridges of Madison County. I think that is probably unbeaten. Yeah. I mean, I love Kramer versus Kramer, but it's not necessarily her performance in that sells me on that film. It is more the dynamic between Dustin Hoffman and the son.
And she's not particularly likable in Kramer versus Kramer, really, ultimately, is she?
Oh, it's a complex.
It is a complex. It's character. That film is great for its character complexity.
And in that time period as well. I can't wait to do Kramer versus Kramer for the podcast. I mean, I've already shown it to you, but
no, we definitely should do it. Absolutely. But it's very difficult, because she did so many different types of movies. Other ones we've got to cover are definitely French Lieutenant's Woman and Out of Africa from this great earlier period. But I keep referencing the really underrated ones that were commercial flops, that were Heartburn and Falling in Love.
And I'm really intrigued by this Silkwood film as well, that's kind of advertised alongside this one. Yeah,
I think you'll want to do that at some point, maybe this year. Kevin Kline as Nathan. For me, really the biggest surprise of the film, I would say, and just so engrossing and engaging with how intense he was and fluctuating those emotions.
Well, he's playing like 5 different characters in this film almost.
Yeah. A real split personality.
Yeah, the kind of unpredictability and kind of maniacal edge to his performance.
Yep. Yeah, brilliant. Really, really, really bit of a scene stealer, really. I mean, it's hard to steal scenes from Meryl Streep, but Kevin Kline,
they're great together.
Yeah, they really do dovetail very well. It's a great chemistry here. But a really highly rated actor who was getting into his own lane in this earlier part of the 80s, because he'd had a lot of really respected stage work in the 70s. Actually, this was his movie debut, which was followed the year after by The Big Chill, which is a very popular romantic comedy about a group of young characters in the early 80s.
What else have you seen him in?
I've seen him in some of the more rubbish later stuff, like Wild Wild West. I have seen A Fish Called Wanda, not all the way through, but we do need to cover that for the podcast because it's a very highly rated film and a great cast in that. The Chaplin biopic, he's in that as well. Around this time, he was also in a musical that was Gilbert and Sullivan, The Pirates of Penzance, with Angela Lansbury, and one of my all-time favourite singers, Linda Ronstadt. So,
I've seen him
interesting career.
I've seen him in the 99 version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, playing Bottom.
Yeah.
And I couldn't unsee it once I knew what he was in that version. All I could see when I saw him then was him with donkey ears.
Yeah, very interesting career. Like really varied works in all types of genres. But I think this earlier part of his career was very interesting. I'd be interested to see what you think of The Big Chill, because it has a lot of actors in the 80s who were really up and coming, like Glenn Close, Jeff Goldblum. So, yeah, and it's definitely your type of film, I would say.
Yeah.
Before those kind of more popular ones like that were done by John Hughes. Peter MacNicol as Stingo. He looked familiar to me throughout this, and I was trying to think of what it was from. And then when I looked into it, I realised it was for something far less highbrow, and that was Bean the movie. Because he plays the American gallery curator who chaperones Bean in LA. So that was far later. But what did you think of his performance in this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good contrast, isn't it, to the kind of extremity of Kevin Kline's performance.
You need a character to be more grounded, don't you? To contrast with the other two.
Yeah.
And he's the first-hand narrator throughout the most part.
As the writer, yeah.
Throughout the most of the film, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good performance, but I mean, and it's a needed performance, but it is overshadowed by the other two's kind of extremities. But
yeah, but I think it was a good performance overall. I do have a lot of respect for it. I don't know what else we'll see him in, because most of his career has been pretty much dominated by big American TV, like he was in Ally McBeal, 24, and recently had a long-standing role in Veep as well.
I think I'd seen him in Grey's Anatomy.
Okay, there's another one. Yeah, so it's really dominated the cast by those three. But the other one I wanted to mention was Eugene Lipinski as the Polish professor, because it's the second time we're mentioning him on the podcast. After only recently, he was in the Sherlock Holmes episode, The Dancing Men, where he played the American gangster.
Such a random
Very
link.
odd coincidence. Yeah, absolutely. But that episode was done in 84, so it was only 2 years after this.
Yeah.
So it does make sense. And I think he is originally Polish, so he was a good casting choice. But he's only in one scene, really. The director, Alan J. Pakula, it's another repeat appearance for him as well, because we did All the President's Men.
Yeah, of
Really,
course.
it's a very different type of movie. And this movie also really stands out as kind of incongruous, again, for being totally different in the themes that he would normally do. Pakula did a lot of conspiracy thrillers in the 70s, like The Parallax View of Warren Beatty and Clute and All the President's Men, which were all massive hits.
Yeah.
But the director really had a reputation for those type of films. So by the time he got to this, it must have been a bit like audiences didn't know what to expect, I guess. So what was our final rating that we gave it out of 5 is?
I think this is definitely a film that needs rewatching. So this is my initial response to it, but I anticipate that maybe that would change on a second watch. And I was very impressed with the performances, and I think maybe with just kind of reset expectations of what it's going to be about, maybe I would have a different response. But as a first watch, I've said it's a kind of a slow burn character study that combines, you know, some complex themes, complex personalities, secrecy, guilt, toxicity, dependency, and it is set amongst this kind of historical, tumultuous historical period. I mean, it's a classic Streep performance. It's so believable, compelling, natural, but it's Kline who is, as you say, like a surprise with this kind of rocky unpredictability. He's fantastic, and he's a real scene stealer. And I think the screenwriting and the development of these characters and the dynamics between them is very good, and I like the kind of Gatsby-esque kind of dynamic that's established. But there's something that doesn't click for me, and I think it's because of those expectations of what it was going to be about. And I just feel like you can't really have it both ways. I feel like if you're going to handle a topic as emotionally devastating as children in the Holocaust, I feel like it doesn't quite hit the mark.
You kind of need to focus on that and make that the focus of the emotions and the characters.
And it makes me almost uncomfortable that I haven't had an emotional reaction to that. I'm like, what's wrong with me that I haven't had that reaction? But I think it's to do with they're trying to fit almost too much in. They really want to do the character development of these three toxic to each other characters, but then they throw that in and it's almost like too rushed.
I don't think we're the only ones though, because I think even critics around then had mixed reactions to it. As I said, it did well at the award ceremonies, but the actual critics gave it very mixed reviews. I think some they said that it didn't quite hit the levels that it thought it was. Some people criticised the writing.
It really just depends.
Roger Ebert said it was the best film of 1982.
It really just depends what you're expecting from it. Because if you go in thinking, okay, it's going to be a really interesting film about three people who are really toxic to each other, and it's about a complex relationships, then maybe you would feel differently. But it's just not what I was expecting at all. And for me, that means that there was a sense of kind of flatness to the whole bit about the Holocaust, which felt really quite uncomfortable, actually, because you're thinking, this should feel emotional. Because
you feel like it's leading to something throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
And then when it leads to something that ultimately falls flat, you feel either what's wrong with me as the viewer, have I missed something, or is the story being told to me in a way that I can't engage with?
Yeah. So I gave it 4. But
4. But that's a respectful score, and I've given it 4.25 because I think we are very much in alignment with you. We had disagreements on Brief Encounter, unfortunately, but I think on this one, for the most part, we agree that it's a first-time watch for us, and it didn't quite turn out to be what we expected. But we have a lot of respect for the performances, particularly in the first half of the film, I would say. But it was very fluctuating, and the characterization was very complex. If it kind of just didn't go into the flashbacks, I would have been equally as interested to see how this trio turned out if it wasn't a Holocaust movie. But really, really charged performances from Kline and Streep, and I have so much respect from both of those two as actors. And I can see why it's an important early Meryl Streep film to watch. But I do need to watch it again, but I can't watch it again too soon because it needs time to kind of digest it and kind of think about it over the years. And I will revisit it because I definitely think it deserves that.
Yeah.
So a funny one to kind of look back on the day after watching it for the first time. But 4.25 is definitely a good score, I would say. Let's take a break and we'll be back with my next choice.
Sophie's choice was a completely wonderful experience to make. And it's only after I finished it and people said, oh, that must have been so hard. And I was going, no, it was really fun. That I realized I was sort of shattering some, the impact of that the film had on people. Because it was thoroughly joyous experience to work with those two actors and to work with Alan Pakula. I mean, it really is true that he came to our dressing room. We all got made up in the same room. So Peter MacNicol was here, and I was here. Kevin Kline was there. And Pakula appeared in the mirror behind us, and I looked at him, and he had tears running down his face, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, we're halfway done. And it just made me, I loved him so much, and he loved the process of making that film as much as his actors did. So, it was a great experience.
Right, that was Sophie's choice, and for my next podcast I will be selecting the film that I've been building up to for many, many years.
6 years?
Yes. This is it. Are you aware of it? This is it. This is the big one.
I am very aware of this.
Are you? Yeah. So what are your kind of prior expectations, and what can you tell the listeners to save me saying what my favourite film of all time is?
Because you might combust with excitement.
Yeah, and I'm desperately doing everything to kind of dampen any expectations for you as to how good this is going to be.
Are we returning to Hitchcock by any chance?
Yeah, it's the next big one in the Hitchcock marathon on Couple Indemnity.
And your favourite Hitchcock film?
My favourite, yes, and my most respected Hitchcock film. A movie that's in recent years, gone to top of certain movie polls as the greatest film of all time. Sight and Sound, I think, is the one that did it. And it overtook Lawrence of Arabia and...
Shawshank,
I think. No, Shawshank is more like an IMDb one, I think.
Yeah.
But Vertigo is not usually people's favourite Hitchcock movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we get to the second or the latter part of the Hitchcock marathon, you'll see why others choose more popular films like North by Northwest and Psycho, Rear Window particularly as well. But Vertigo.
I know you are so nervous to show me this film because I think you are so scared that I'm not going to like it.
Just slam it like Brief Encounter and some of the others.
No, but I know this one would feel even more personal
A
to
personal
you than
dig.
Brief Encounter.
Yeah. No, we need to be objective because we are.
I don't
reviewing it.
really know what it's about. All I know is we've got a coaster that I bought you with like a shot of like, is it Golden Gate Bridge?
Yeah, so you know it's San Francisco at least.
I know that this is a big film for you.
All I would say is you may not like it ultimately. I certainly don't think you're going to love the underlying theme that comes throughout the film, and I don't think you're going to like the ending either, because I didn't like the ending on the first couple of times I watched it. But I hope you do at least have a lot of respect for it, particularly on a technical level. Mm-hmm. And all I would say is, I'm not going to tell you anything about the story or the plot or what transpires, but it's not particularly long. It's 2 hours 10 minutes. Try and take in what you're seeing and hearing on the screen, even in the parts of the film where not an awful lot is actually happening. The details, like the incredible Technicolor, like it's one of the most stunning Technicolor films we'll ever see. The unbelievable and haunting musical score throughout it, that's unending, by Bernard Herrmann, who did all the great Hitchcock films, because it continues in a lot of non-dialogue parts of the movie where not an awful lot is happening in the first half of the film. But it's another Jimmy Stewart performance, and one of the darkest ones we'll see. So it's exciting. I had wanted to show it to you on the big screen, but we've come up to this point in the Hitchcock marathon, and we can't seem to find a screening that is at a good time. So I think we're just going to watch it and turn up the volume and make it as cinematic as possible. So we'll leave it there. We've been Couple Indemnity, and you can find us on all good podcast platforms, as ever, including Apple and Spotify. We're on coupleindemnity@gmail.com. Do let us know what you think of Sophie's Choice, if you rate it or if you have a few issues with it like we did. You can get us on the socials like X, Blue Sky, and of course on YouTube as well, as we mentioned. So next week, join us for a little bit of her, a little bit of me, and a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock in San Francisco with Vertigo. See you then, guys.
Bye, guys.